Happy National Signing Day, Bucknutters. I'm Dan Rubin, publisher of Bucknuts. Pleased to be joined by 24/7 Sports Midwest recruiting analyst Steve Wiltfong. And though Steve has spent the last 8 hours or so on the set down in Florida with the CBSSports.com crew, gracious enough to grant us some time here in the afternoon to talk about Ohio State and how everything came down on National Signing Day. Steve, what was that like to be a TV superstar, at least online, for as long as you were? Did you guys get to eat or drink anything, by the way? I was always wondering that.
Ate a couple bites of a sandwich, ate a cookie, had a couple chips, a couple bottles of water. I mean, there was plenty of food, but not much time, especially when Ohio State's in the process of landing Darius Slade, and then you have Malik McDowell and that storyline going on. So plenty of recruiting things to keep my attention.
Yeah, before we get into Ohio State's class in general and then break down some specifics, did want to kind of touch on some of the lingering news of the day. Obviously, the Malik McDowell situation was an incredible ride. Are you hearing anything now that would lead you to believe that this is not over? There's some speculation that he may not even have signed, that he signed a fake piece of paper. Is there any reason for Buckeye Nation to think that he could end up being in this class?
Well, to my knowledge, I think Michigan State's still confident that they'll get the letter of intent from him. There's no timeline on that, but it was just crazy how it played out, because for a couple of days I just didn't know how he was going to be able to pick Michigan State with, his parents being so against Michigan State. But I know the Spartans coaching staff had a chance to talk to Malik's dad again on Tuesday, leading up to Malik's final decision. There's no question where Malik wants to go. He wants to be in East Lansing to play football. Now I'm to the point where I still think anything can happen, but he's made it this far. He's committed to Michigan State. He's 4 months away from turning 18. I think that I'd almost, nothing would surprise me, but I think he's going to end up at Michigan State.
I think nothing would surprise me definitely applies to this recruitment. I'd never seen anything like that. Go ahead.
I know some schools are obviously still keeping in contact, Florida State, and so, we'll see how this shakes out. But right now, he made it this far. I think he'll be a Spartan.
Yeah, I've been covering recruiting in some form for almost 20 years, and I've never seen anything get this screwy down the stretch. You referenced him earlier. We thought this class was going to end with 22 guys, and then lo and behold, word breaks this morning that Darius Slade is seriously considering the Buckeyes. Take us through kind of the last 24 hours of how you followed that, which ended up with Darius being the last guy to fax in his letter of intent and become member number 23 of the recruiting class.
Yeah, well, I guess, talking to some sources in Columbus after Sean Shear put the story on my radar on Tuesday. Sean
Shear, who is the recruiting guy at Spartan Tailgate, the Michigan State 24/7 sports site.
So he puts the story on my radar, and then, I do my due diligence, and it sounds like Darius was supposed to visit Ohio State last weekend and didn't make it to Columbus. So we could have had, some excitement there with that. But it turns out, he decided he still wanted to take that visit to Columbus. So he was not going to sign his letter of intent today, and he was going to wait and take an official visit to Ohio State, not this weekend, but next weekend. And he asked Michigan State to, be patient with him and let him check out the Buckeyes and then decide between the two programs. And, Coach Mark D'Antonio and his staff decided that that's not the way they wanted it to go. It was basically signed today or you no longer have an opportunity partner with the Spartans. So they went their separate ways, and, now with Ohio State being the only school left on the board, there was no reason for Darius to wait for his visit the following weekend, and so he committed to the Buckeyes. Now, Coach Larry Johnson, I think, was the difference here for the young man who had 23.5 sacks as a senior, one of the 3 stars in this class of 2014 that I think went under the radar. I think it was a really good get for Ohio State to cap a really good class.
Yeah, speaking of that, what are your overall impressions of the class? We'll break this down to some specifics, but what are your overall impressions of Ohio State's class?
Well, I mean, it's a top 3 class, so again, it's fantastic from top to bottom. Talking to Coach Meyer today and asking him if he's got this roster where he wants it now that he's been in Columbus for the time he's been there and been able to develop the guys he inherited and recruit the guys that he wanted and then develop them. He was saying if the linebackers and safeties, the young guys at those positions pan out, that they got a chance to be a very special football team this fall. For me, my two favorite parts of the class are you look at the linebackers they're bringing in, and they're bringing in Kyle Berger and they're bringing in Sam Hubbard. But I love the two guys at the top in Dante Booker at outside linebacker and Raekwon McMillan at inside backer. Those two 5-stars are arguably the best players in the country at their position, so they're fantastic. And then speed, more speed. You see the Ohio State coaches tweet about it all the time, and Coach Meyer talk about it all the time. And they went out and landed some guys that can be really big difference makers on offense. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, Paris Campbell. Those are guys that are going to be very exciting players with the ball in their hands on top of the guys that are already on the roster.
Talk about Booker for a little bit, and I think from the 24/7 Sports perspective, at least you guys on the national scene, he kind of blew up at the opening. Is that accurate? I know that we talked when you were out there, and you were really impressed by him. Talk about what you saw from him out there.
Well, Booker actually debuted in our top 10 rankings for 2015, the first ones that ever came out. And for whatever reason, he slid a little bit. But I always thought he was a fantastic athlete for his size, one of the top overall athletes in the country. He went to the Nike football training camp and had a good day and earned an invite to the opening. And just to put it in perspective, he was one of the best players overall at the opening, regardless of position. And he had one of the best highlights of the week, a 99-yard interception return for a touchdown with some of the fastest players in America running after him. So that just gives you an idea of what type of athlete Dante Booker is, and he's not nowhere close to being maxed out physically. So it's going to be fun to watch him grow. I think he's going to be really, really special. And a mad salute to someone that can win Mr. Football on the defensive side of the ball with so many great players in that state. Dante Booker winning Mr. Football was a heck of a way for him to cap his career.
As you look at Ohio State's class, it's a lot of the guys are very highly ranked. Is there a guy from the lower aspect of the class that you think might be the sleeper for the group?
Well, there's not a lot of sleepers, like you said. I think it's 18 4-stars out of 23. And, obviously we talked about Darius Slade, and, I love him. Again, 23.5 sacks, a state championship. He was at the top of a lot of schools' boards. Michigan State, they do a great job of evaluating guys, especially at that position. And he was a guy that they coveted. Nebraska, Coach Bo Pelini and his track record all side of the ball, they coveted him too. Darius Slade is the 3-star guy that I think is going to perhaps play like a 5-star.
23.5 sacks is no joke, no question. I know I had someone in East Lansing tell me they thought he could be the next Shalik Calhoun.
I would assume that offenses paid attention to him also.
You cover the Midwest like nobody else. There's been a lot of coaching upheaval. As we head into the 15 cycle, I think it's pretty fair to say, I don't know if this is hubris, I think it's fair to say Ohio State's still considered the kingpin in the Midwest. Who do you see now going forward as Ohio State's chief competition in the Midwest?
Well, Ohio State and Notre Dame both recruit nationally, but it seems like they kind of target different areas in a way. I don't know. They definitely offer some of the same guys, but it doesn't seem like they have too many big recruiting battles outside of the Midwest. But, Ohio State, they're off to a good start in 2015. Notre Dame's, landed 3 4-star kids already in 2015. I think those two schools have separated themselves as top recruiting schools in the Midwest. Obviously Michigan's bringing in some great players, but I think if you break it down and look at it, Notre Dame and Ohio State have finished consistently higher, even if it's by a hair in some years. So, I think, but those are the 3 schools. Now, will Michigan State benefit from the Rose Bowl? I think they will. They have a chance to really own the state in 2015 with the top guys there, and there's some really good ones. Brian Cole, the offense-defense dual guy that can be a standout in the secondary or at the receiver position, and Michael Weber. I think both those guys are special talents. I know Ohio State has offered both of them, but Michigan State's in a strong position with those two guys. So we'll see what kind of domino effect they get from winning the Big Ten title and playing in the Rose Bowl. And I don't know if you count Penn State in the Midwest or not, but anytime you have a coaching change at a major university, you see that reap rewards on the recruiting trail. Obviously, it happened with Urban Meyer at Ohio State. Bill O'Brien recruited well right off the bat at Penn State, despite the circumstances. He came in, and Brian Kelly and Brady Hoke the same. And I think James Franklin is going to do a fantastic job, and Penn State's going to push for a top 15 class, if not better as well.
Yeah, we've talked about this. I talked about this ad nauseum, but James Franklin spoke at the 24/7 Sports Convention a couple years ago, and I was ready to sign with Vanderbilt after that. That is a charismatic dude. I think he's going to do a great job at Penn State. Speaking of that, talk about the Big Ten in general. It's obviously a conference that takes a lot of hits on the national stage and needs to improve the overall talent base. In general, how do you think the Big Ten fared today when all ink was dried?
Well, I mean, when you look at the recruiting rankings, it was SEC heavy in the top 10 with a dash of Ohio State, a sprinkle of Florida State, and a drop of Notre Dame. But I do think that these Big Ten classes were solid. You know, Penn State, Michigan State, I think they landed some difference makers. This is one of the better classes Wisconsin signed in a while. They always sign guys in the trenches and do a good job there, but this time they were able to land some guys that I think can be some difference makers at the skill position. Northwestern, you know, they were a top 45 class this year. It was a small class, but they did a really great job in Chicago, landing 3 4-star players from the Chicago area. So I like what Northwestern did. In Illinois, they didn't finish very well in the Big Ten recruiting rankings, but I love what they did with the JUCOs. I think they got some guys that are going to be instant impact guys for them next year at the receiver position, and then they brought in blue chip defensive tackle Jihad Ward to help stabilize that defensive line. I think Illinois is a team that could be on the verge of winning more games next year and playing in a bowl.
So you're down there in Florida at the CBSSports.com studios, and you're hanging out with guys like Bruce Feldman and Jeremy Fowler from CBS. This is just a Buckeye question. Do you get the sense that when you get further out from the Midwest and kind of get down in the South and the Florida area, do you get the sense that those guys and the national people view Ohio State differently than the rest of the Big Ten?
Absolutely. I think that Ohio State gets more respect from the national media, but they've earned it, you know, with the type of recruiting classes they brought in and even the guys they miss on. I mean, they're finalists for great players. And you know, Urban Meyer is a rock star, lightning rod figure in college football. There's several famous coaches, but then you got your Mount Rushmore, and Coach Meyer's definitely on it. So there's no question that Ohio State has a sex appeal that the other programs maybe don't. I mean, I think that Notre Dame, people see what they're doing as well, but it's not they don't get the same kind of attention that Ohio State does, and Ohio State's earned it.
So according to 24/7 Sports Composite, the Buckeyes have had top 5 classes in the 3 years Meyer's been in the mix. I think they're going to finish number 3 this year, number 2 last year, and 5 the year before that. Do you see any reason why this will come to an end in 2015 or 16? Do you see any reason for Buckeye Nation to expect the momentum to cease?
The only way Ohio State, in my opinion, does not finish with the top 5 class under Coach Meyer and the hardworking assistant coaches that you so often get ignored because you just talk about Urban Meyer, but Urban Meyer demands his assistant coaches to be good recruiters or you can't be on his staff. So the two ways, they're taking a small class, which hurts your ranking. You know, Northwestern, from top to bottom, signed a better class than a couple schools that were ranked ahead of them, in my opinion. But
sure,
they only signed 16. So if Ohio State has to go with a small class, maybe they finish outside the top 10. But I sure don't see them outside the top 15. Or if somehow, and I can't even fathom, they don't win. And but you see the roster, and
how dare you,
see how close they are. You see how close they are. That it's just they're going to be bringing in top recruiting classes regularly, and they're going to be winning a lot of games regularly.
So now that National Signing Day has almost come to a close, and you're down in Florida, I assume you'll be heading down to South Beach for some partying, or when are we going to get you back in the Midwest?
I'm excited to get back home. I travel home on Thursday. A little personal note, but my wife and I find out what we're having. First baby next week, so I'm pretty pumped about that. And, you know, as you know, in this world, we'll quickly turn our attention to the 2015 class and start working on that. So no vacation or anything like that, just looking forward to hanging out with my colleague Ryan Bartow tonight, our guy who does a fantastic job in SEC country for 24/7 Sports. And so him and I will throw back a couple cocktails tonight, and then we'll be on the airplane and back to business tomorrow.
Well, congrats on the baby, and we will give Urban Meyer a call and let him know class of 2034 for Wiltfong Jr. if it happens to be a boy.
Well, you know what's crazy is you see how it ended with legends like Bobby Bowden and stuff. I hope by then people aren't trying to push him out.
No chance. All right, Steve, thanks a bunch, bud.